All right, so we are on. Welcome to DojoCast. I'm Sensei Mish, and I'm here with Sensei Shannon Spahan. Spahan. Okay, I knew I was going to screw that up.
It's all good.
Yeah, right on. Welcome. If you guys are not already subscribers, please hit that subscribe button. Hit like, comment. I'd love to hear what you guys hear. Want to talk about, conversate, connect with us. I have Shannon here today just to talk about martial arts. So we've met a couple times through seminars, but tell me a little bit about yourself, your background.
So, I started with my father. He taught Chungguk, a Chinese Korean freestyle karate. I trained off and on with him when I could. And then I jumped around because my dad and I were big fans of Bruce Lee, so I jumped around a lot and didn't really think rank was important at the time. So I just dabbled in some Okunan, some Taekwondo, some Shonryu. And then eventually I met an instructor, Guru Curtis Goodwin, and I started training in Silat, Modern Arnis, Laotian kickboxing, Iron Palm, Tibetan Qigong. So we did quite a bit there. And unfortunately we had a falling out. So life kind of gets in the way of things. And then I ended up going up to Sifu Al School, so DeCosco's martial arts. And there I obtained my black and still continue to teach Kajukenbo.
Right on. Yeah. Right on. Now, you were telling me about earlier about putting together like a competition team, because I know I've seen on Facebook you've been down at competitions with your son. Tell me about that. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so right now me and a friend of mine, Marcus Atkins, this is all kind of like in the works right now, but we're just putting together a local team, competition team, and we really want to get back to focusing on basics and improving those a lot. So just, and with point fighting, you're really you're down to 5-6 moves, and mastering those moves, and so we want to try to get some excellence back and try to bring it back to the community, because right now we don't have a big tournament circuit. Well, actually I should say, so Sifu Rick Cropper has put together a league, and so here in the Northwest, which is, I believe it's 5 tournaments now, but you get to, each time you compete at one of the tournaments, you accumulate points. And at the end, at the Mighty River Classic, after the tournament's done, they'll tally up all the points, and they have an award ceremony and banquet to award the winners of the league. So, which is pretty cool. So, it kind of started, my son, who hasn't trained for a little while, was like, Dad, I want to compete again, and I was like, okay. I was like, all right, let's do it. So we just started training, and we went down to compete last month, and my son took first place in the color belt division, and so here we are.
Okay, cool. Now, how old is your son?
He's 16.
Okay, right on.
Yeah. So last week we took a trip down to Oakland, and we did it's a WACO. So WACO's the world. It's one of the tournament leagues in Europe. So it was a WACO skills camp with Michael Jefferson, who's on Team Paul Mitchell.
Okay.
So we went down there and did that training. But it's been fun, trying to see these guys, and the level that these guys that are competing at now is a very high level.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I've never I mean, I competed early on in my martial arts career because I started in Taekwondo, and I found for myself I really wasn't. For me, it wasn't about competition, the martial arts. It was more, self-defense, and there's a different path along that for me. I started at Chase on 116th and Halsey. There.
Right. Yeah.
like most people in the area, or at least on the east side. Yeah. But he, I don't know. It was very, of course, because it was Taekwondo. It was very competition. That wasn't me. And so I ended up leaving and then going to, when I was going to Mount Hood Community, of course, I go there. They have a Taekwondo program, and it's all the Chase people. And
right.
But I started, so that's kind of where I did my competition was there, and I did it for a few years. And but then I myself moved on. So I haven't really been in any type of competition. So it does it intrigues me. Like Professor Dan Anderson out in Gresham, he's huge name point fighter back in the days.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's, I think it does give some value for training. Like just when we were setting up here, you were talking about, technique and how, like, in a way, self-defense has gotten away from that. But if you focus on your technique, of course, that makes your self-defense better. It makes your points, your sparring, your tournament fighting better. And just like you were saying, if you're focusing on, at least if you're focusing on the tournament style, you only got 5 or 6 moves that you can really focus on and improve and get better at.
Yeah, I think that point fighting, I mean, besides just the game, it brings some great attributes. I mean, one is, setups, you're learning how to set people up, bridging the gap, critical distance, all these kind of things. And it is about self-improvement, really, because we all feel comfortable in our own space, in our own training centers. But to get out and compete with these guys that are on a national level, it just makes you realize, like, okay, well, here we are in Portland or Vancouver, and this is what we have here. But when you get out to like the Bay Area or these guys on the East Coast, it's kind of like there's another level of competition, and you can evaluate yourself and grow, from that aspect of competition. I really think competition is important for everybody, because there's no other way to really get that anxiety or that feeling of uncomfortableness unless you're going against somebody. And even when you spar in class, a lot of times it's not the same, Right. And actually talking with Bill Shaw, he actually had mentioned before that he would make all of his students compete. And I, and I know that there's a lot of people that don't think that's necessary, but now that I kind of look at it, I think it kind of is necessary for the person's growth and courage, especially courage. That's a huge aspect to help with getting over the fears of even doing a kata in a tournament. You're up there getting judged, and that's going to help you understand, like, okay, I didn't do well. Okay, so why didn't I do well? This is about me and me improving myself. Right. So what do I got to do now to improve it? Well,
I think I have another show called Mondays with Sensei Mish, and that's not a shameless plug, but it is. But I was wanting to do an episode on violence, and it's just basically me talking, or whatever. At least it is right now. And that kind of started with the conversation that I had with a buddy of mine at work, is that we deal, we work in hospital security. And so we are hands-on with other humans every day. And we see a lot of violence, whether, the person knows that they're being violent or not. But we also deal with a lot of nurses that really, they get freaked out. They're not used to violence. And as you start, as you're talking about, sparring and anxiety, we got some new guys that come in who've never been in a fight. And, we've kind of improved our training program at the hospital for security to, with some basically live consim. We got the hitman suit, and we're really kind of putting people to the test in that kind of that sparring aspect to get rid of that anxiety. Because when you're in that real fight, honestly, in reality, we don't know what we're going to do. We're going to, because you've got that freeze, fight or flight type of response. But if you're really going to save your life, it is, you have to fight.
Yeah, you got to respond.
You have to respond. And, even though I wasn't really competition in the beginning, there is value in it, because if you're, just like you were saying, you're getting rid of that anxiety. If you lost a fight, why did I lose? Did I open myself up? Did I move the wrong way? You can't really, you may not have that opportunity to reflect in a real situation. So as I've matured in martial arts, I've seen, competition, there is a place for it, even in a self-defense art,
Yeah. I think, is sport the answer? Is it the end all? No, it's a part of it. You know what I mean? I mean, when you look at the totality of martial arts in general, it's like a small spectrum, Right. And the bottom line is that martial arts is about self-protection. And anytime we go to a sport, it kind of veers away from it, but what you're getting out of the sport is just trying to enhance your ability to defend yourself, and like you, I work at corrections, in corrections health at the Justice Center, and I work in the nursing department. So, it's funny because that you say that, but no, it's true. I mean, people get nervous when things happen, when all of a sudden there's a change in attitude, and there's aggressiveness coming at you. And even though a sport fight is not a real fight, it still gives you something, a high stress, high intensity, dealing with anxiety, to help you kind of say, okay, I've been in a situation, I've been in a fight before, and it's safe. And another thing is that we have, people have to go back to work on Monday. So it's not like, hey, they can go get in the cage and just get beat up and go back. You might have a doctor in class. You might have, people that are professionals, and they don't want to go to work with black eyes, or, and the point fighting, it gives you a safer road. It doesn't mean that you can't get a black eye, but it is a lot safer, so.
Yeah, I in thinking through violence, I mean, I'm a big fan of Rory Miller and his books. In fact, Facing Violence is a required read for my students, just because of the value that it gives. But I think that it takes a certain type of person to be in a fight. Whether I think I don't know, since you've been doing the sport thing more than me. It's I think a lot of people, they have to have some type of screw loose. I've always said that I've got a screw loose because, I work in security. I've been a bouncer. I've been in those fights, and walked away with, okay, whatever. It was just, I'll just, continue on to the next day.
Right. Right.
A normal human doesn't just do that.
Right. Right.
So.
Well, when you look at, like, say, cage fighting or the UFC,
right?
I was sitting there and I was like, okay, I take, for instance, I believe it was Cain Velasquez versus Bigfoot Silva.
Okay.
And, Cain Velasquez is on top of this guy, just grounding and pounding, and he's a bloody pulp, and he can't stop because the guy hasn't tapped out, the ref hasn't stopped the fight. But he has to keep going. I mean, and when you say screws loose, it's like, what kind of mentality? I mean, that's just like, Roman, like takes you back to the Roman gladiator days,
Right.
And you see this like, wow, so, I mean, I think like we need to have, as a martial artist, hopefully we never have to go there.
Right.
You know what I mean? I get like the UFC and that it's a sport and they're trying to make money and all that. Do I believe like it aligns with the true martial artist? No, because I mean, the idea is that, hey, we're going to just protect ourselves if we have to. We're not going to go, in a cage and I don't know. It's just something different. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it.
Right. Well, I don't, when it comes to the UFC, it's interesting. I watched it, I can't remember what year it started in. I watched it the first couple years because it was truly art against art, and that's what intrigued me about it. Uh-huh. And then once it started looking all the same, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to turn it off. Yeah. But then, you hear about certain fighters. So I watch it occasionally because I'll be like, ooh, I like the way that person fights. Uh-huh. But it was interesting to kind of see, art against art. Yeah. But yeah, when it comes to, I don't know. I think originally people did that to, test it out. How is my art, versus another art,
right? Which
also takes, another screw loose or maybe a little bit ego in
right,
there,
right.
But yeah, it's. But when it comes to violence, yeah, I think it just takes that certain person, and a lot of people don't.
They won't go there.
They won't go there.
Yeah.
So, now, have you done any training with Rory at all?
He came to one of the Kaju seminars, so I got to work with him, I think, once.
Was that one of the ones that Trent?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was that's when I first met him. Uh-huh. I had heard about him before, but I harassed Trent to tell me what time he was teaching. And
oh, gotcha.
But yeah, no, it's. Have you read any of his books at all?
I haven't got to read any of his books. I've heard about him because he used to work where I work.
Right.
So, and Sifu Kevin Jackson talks really good things about him. My life's really busy right now because I went back to college. I'm in school full time, working full time, and then on top of it, trying to help teach this team.
Right.
So, but no, I'm sure he has great, a lot of great advice, working in criminal justice, and as a law enforcement, as a sergeant. I believe he was a sergeant at my work. So
yeah, he was. I think he was one of the trainers there too.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that kind of turned me on that first book of his, Meditations on Violence, was essentially talking about how martial arts don't teach, because when it comes to even when it comes to self-defense aspects of martial arts, whether it be sport or martial art or whatever, that true violent encounter is missing in the training.
Yeah, you can't make it. It's hard to make it real.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, I mean, in any type, I mean, getting like a red man suit and that stuff is probably, one of the realest things that you can do, because you can really unload and you can, elevate the attack, but again, I think just like that screw you said, like you got to have, I mean, it's really up to the individual. You can give anybody the skills, but when fight or flight kicks in, it doesn't mean it's going to come out, you just hope that survival instincts come in, and it doesn't mean, I mean, and here's another thing I think that people misunderstand is that they think like the system that I learn, this system is better, or this system, and to me, I think the system that you do is going to be the one that works best for you. And then it's up to the practitioner to make it efficient. Right. So, like a lot of people knock Taekwondo, but it's like you get an Olympic level Taekwondo guy, and man, you don't want to be in his kicking range at all.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely agree.
And the thing is to get past that kicking range is going to be hard. You know, it's not going to be as easy as people think. You know, you could train in, a Gracie system and still get knocked out. You know, you could train in a Kaju system and still get knocked out because we're human. You know, I think the best self-defense is avoidance. You know.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny. I didn't get started in the martial arts until I was 18. Because my kid, I wanted to train earlier, but my parents said that I would get hurt. Right. Oh, you'll get hurt, and be like, I could get, but I was allowed to play soccer. And when you look at concussion rates in soccer compared to any other sport, it's like through the roof. Right.
Which is crazy. You wouldn't think soccer would have a concussion rate, but
yeah. But and my dad said that initially I could study judo because my step uncle was a big judo player, and so, but I didn't want to roll around on the floor with guys. I wanted to hit people. That was kind of what I wanted to do karate. You know? And didn't help the Karate Kid came out and promoted all that. But so I didn't really get started until I was 18. But it really was that self-defense aspect that kind of got me into it. That's why I wasn't attracted to the sport thing.
Right.
And I was going down a trail and I completely forgot where I was going with that. But I think that as I've grown as a martial artist, See, I lost it. Yeah, I guess it is what it is.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I can pick up. So I think that as you grow as a martial artist, I think you start seeing value in almost anything that you do.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of where I was going with that. There is value in everything. And like a friend of mine had reached out, and because they're like, okay, well, what do you teach? It's like, well, I teach Okinawan Kempo, and I do a little bit of Arnis, and but I also do knife too. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, do you do Aikido? And I was like, I don't teach Aikido. I've done a little bit, did a little bit here and there. They're like, well, yeah, I really like that art. Okay, like that art. You know, when it comes to which art is best for you, I think that's kind of where I was going, because we had
talked about that. Yeah.
It's, what art speaks to you.
Right.
Like initially, I didn't want to play judo, wasn't really a competition guy. So it wasn't until I got to Ryukyuan Kempo that's like, okay, this is the art that I like. Mm-hmm. And then even when I was doing that, we had, Dillman, Wally J was, the big three. They had the big three seminars. Mm-hmm. And so when my instructor was like, oh, you should probably learn a weapon, I was like, oh, Rami Priestess, he does sticks. That makes sense, because, pretty much anything could be made to stick, a baton or a piece of wood, or, just like a branch that's going to be laying around on the floor,
Yeah.
But it was, but it really wasn't until I was introduced to Bram Frank that I was, it's like, okay, well, I never had played with a knife. Uh-huh. I'd always had knives, always had a pocket knife, but it wasn't until I met him I got to appreciate the knife, and that's my tool. Yeah. I can do a little bit of stick. I prefer the blade.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like we stair step into, it's like, okay, well, I want to get into the martial arts and I'll start here, but you end up in a completely different place.
Right. Yeah. You fall in love with some certain aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's funny because I grew up, here I am, a huge fan of Bruce Lee. Right. So, and in an era where it was like ninja was big, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I wanted to be a ninja. And so I wanted to have nunchucks, so nunchucks was my weapon. And so my friend from high school was like, oh, you need to come and learn the sticks. And I'm like, learn the sticks? I'm like, I don't want to learn the sticks. Yeah. I'm like, he's all, no, I got this guy, that comes over to my house and teaches sticks, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm okay, So then when I started with Curtis and I started learning Arnis, I was like, oh wow, this is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more functional than a nunchuck. So and then when I really got into the martial arts community, what I passed on was Professor Leonard Trigg.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. I'm just like, are you kidding me? So it was kind of, I was just like, so my friend Frank, his uncle made Filipino weapons.
Okay.
And so he was friends with Professor Trigg, and Trigg would come over and teach them for, lessons. And so I passed on that, because I was young and dumb, So it's funny, but no, it's funny. And then our niece ended up being my thing. I like the blade. The blade's one of the scariest weapons to, ever to have to deal with, and that's something that you just hope that you never have to deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's funny because when I first started learning stick, it was, it's like, oh, okay, whatever you can do with a stick, you need to do it empty hand and it translates to knife. Mm-hmm. But it really takes the right instructor to say, and when I started learning knife, it was like, okay, well, it's like, okay, well, if we're going to be disarming a stick, we end up grabbing onto the end of the stick and kind of going through whatever. Mm. It's like, well, in reality, you're grabbing the blade. So why are you training yourself to grab a blade? Right. And then, it's like, okay, well, so it doesn't truly translate to knife. And knowing that if you walk in, if a knife comes out, somebody's getting cut. Mm-hmm. Almost everybody's going to be cut. Hopefully it won't be you. And if it is you, your goal is to get cut the least.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, no, and it's funny because when I teach knife, it's like, okay, I can teach you like these disarms. I can teach you this. And you're right. Like when it translates from stick, it's not an exact translation. Right. I can't snake a knife. I mean, right. I don't want to snake a knife. You know what I mean?
That would be bad.
Right. It's funny because when I teach snaking, I'm just like, this is wax on and wax off. I mean, that's all it is. It's straight from the Karate Kid. But, no, I'm like, never rely on a technique unless there's no way out. So I kind of say, like there's the possum syndrome, mm-hmm. like if you corner a possum, you don't want to corner a possum because they're just going to attack you and tear the shit out of you.
Right.
Right. So that's the way with a knife. So knife is distance and barriers. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's pretty much your best friend. And if you don't have those and, or you have a loved one with you and you have to protect, then you're going to have to do something and you have to engage 100% and commit, which is the hardest thing because it's, that's courage and that's, mm-hmm. you have to get over that fear to commit to trying to get a hold of that knife. Don't let it move and disarm, bite, whatever you can,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the one thing that knife training has taught me is respecting the blade. I respect the blade more now than I have ever.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
It's funny because you'll sit there and you get this false sense of security through training. Like you're like, oh, I know how to do a knife disarm. But the reality is like, pull a real knife out and try to do that disarm.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden it's not the same. Right. And you're just like, oh my God, like I'm dealing with this. This is not a scenario. You know what I mean? So, and to translate actually back to the sport aspect,
right.
One of the conversations like Sifu Al talked to me, Sifu Al de Coscos was saying, somebody asked him, what do you like better, point fighting or full contact? And he said, well, he goes, okay, so let's look at this. He goes, I'm going to hit you and you don't hit me, right? That's point fighting. Mm-hmm. And he goes, and then you go to full contact. I'm going to hit you and you hit me, right? He goes, okay, so let's change that now. Let's put a knife in your hand. I'm going to stab you. You don't stab me. Or I'm going to stab you and you stab me. I mean, you know what I mean? He's like, right. So what one do you like better, And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be stabbed, So there's, and that's the one thing, you know, you look at just fencing, and point fighting is like the fencing of martial arts, you know? So even though I steered back to the point fighting or the competition thing.
No, that's okay.
It's not the same. I mean, definitely not the same, you know, as self-defense, but, and I don't think there's anything, I don't know if there's anything that you can do with a knife that's going to get you over that edge to deal with that reality. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you know, there's people who say, okay, well, you know, training with a live blade is beneficial, but I would never pull out a live blade in class except just to show how to cut.
Right.
You know, so it's like, you know, the whole thing is like, oh, I train with live blades. I just think, okay, you're stupid.
Right.
You know,
right.
But, I don't know. I think, you know, there's tools out there that, like there's a tool that has what is it? It's a knife that has kind of like
a shock,
an electric
shock
thing for the edges. And I think that, you know, if you ask Bram Frank, he's like, nope, absolutely not. You know, it's not a good tool. Me personally, I think depending on how you use it in your training is valuable. Like the stuff that I do, the way we run our drills, it really wouldn't work. But I think if you're trying to recreate that dynamic type of, okay, I'm going to be walking down the street and somebody's going to pull a knife and try and stab me, then there's some benefit because you can feel feel that. It's no different than early on in my security training, I went through, you know, I used to carry a gun at work. So we went through a tooler drill. I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's tooler drill is based off of a 21-foot rule. So if you have a gun I have a gun, you have a knife, it's basically a training drill to say that I know that, or to prove that you can travel in 21 feet and get to me before I can draw and fire my weapon.
Gotcha.
So if I come into range of somebody and they have a knife, knowing that they can get to me before I can draw my weapon, it's almost kind of like that first step in the justification to shoot. You know,
right.
Do they have is there justification because they have the opportunity and the intent and all that. So in that drill, you know, and I don't think we did it with white shirts. I've heard other people, they put on a white shirt and then they take the tool and chalk mark it, and then the person runs and they just slashes, and then afterwards you've got all these chalk marks all over you. Mm-hmm. And we didn't do that in my training, but it was, you could feel where they took the plastic knife and just kind of jabbed it in. So looking at my bruises, you know, and other people, you know, looking at the chalk marks, it's like, okay, so somebody holding a knife can do lots of damage to me if before I can pull my sidearm.
Yeah.
You know?
So in our Kaju training, we do kind of similar. We would put like lipstick on a blade, mm-hmm. and then white shirts so that you could see where the slashes are.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is a great learning experience, but it still doesn't simulate the anxiety of the real blade. And I think that's the biggest aspect of, like, you know, and I think that training the blade, like you said, made you more aware of it, and it made you appreciate it more. Even doing these drills, I think it makes you appreciate, like, how deadly it is. Yes. And how hard it is to deal with. You know, you can only make things so real in training. You know what I mean? And you know, actually, like Trent Junker, he'll do some live blade training. And I went over and trained with them one day, and it wasn't live. We didn't do live, but he had some blades that he had dulled. Okay. You know, and we're doing knife sparring. And that created a lot of anxiety because, One is like it would, even though it was dulled, I still had like from doing like tapping and stuff. I still had like I don't know, abrasions from the knife, you know. And then you're like, I'm like, man, I could be punctured by this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And to me, I was like, okay, this training's a little over the top for me. I'm cool with it, you know. I mean, I mean, my reality is that, you know, I don't ever want to be in that situation.
Right.
You know what I mean? And my reality is that, you know, space and barriers is the biggest key, you know, just get away. And a lot of people think the gun is the way to go against the knife. But like you said, the 21-foot rule, you know, unless you have that gun already out and it's on the person targeting them, you know, you know, you better maintain that 21 feet.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even like Danny Nosano, he has the videos have been all over the internet.
Oh, yeah,
but like you know, him training. I don't know if it was a security team or law enforcement, but it was like how deadly a knife could be and how quick it could happen. And so they're like the videos of like, you know, some police guy kind of helping this guy out, and then, you know, he pulls a knife and all of a sudden slash, and it can be that quick.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, you know, here when I think of it, I say, okay, think about this. Okay, an athlete, right? A football player runs 40 yards in 4 seconds. You know what I mean? So imagine that guy coming at you with a knife.
Yeah.
And you're trying to pull your gun.
Yeah. Well, I think even 21 feet, that's I want to try and think of the statistic. I think it's like 1.2 seconds. I mean, it's like,
yeah,
it's like
crazy.
insanely fast.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, when it comes to the stress, I think the only stress that you feel is, you know, doing those drills is, can I do better than the other guys that I'm training with?
Right.
You know, that's the stress, because you know the knife isn't real. You know, it's a safe training situation. I think when it comes to training in any type of art, when it comes to self-defense, it is really hard to, like you said, recreate that stressful environment.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think Rory has done a pretty good job at getting it as close to possible. So one of the drills that we've done with him, I think he did it in one of the seminars that I went to, or that I think that I hosted it. I think it was him and Mark and Dan Anderson? I can't remember. Anyway, so we did it him, and then there was one that he did here, but it was like totally slow motion. So it's kind of like a play for play. So I do my move, you do your move, and kind of a back and forth. But it's like, if you're going to go for the eyes, truly go for the eyes. But, I'm going to go slow. And, if I'm going to put my thumb in your eye, I'm actually going to do this. Right. And I'm not going to push in, but I'm going to give you the sensation of my thumb
like this was
on your eye. Yes.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so I've completed my move. Now it's your turn to respond to that. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting play. I kind of like the it's slow, because it's safe, but it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to a vital area like the eyes, it's going to be a little bit more realistic.
Right. So were you using blade on this?
No, this wasn't blade. This was just a hand-to-hand. We were working on locks.
Gotcha.
So just kind of dynamic locking. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah.
So and I don't know if you've done, so Kajukenbo has a drill similar called 6 count.
Okay.
But you get to do 6 moves, like 6 attacks, and then the other person counters on the 6th.
Okay.
And then does 6 back, and then you counter on the 6th. So it's a good training tool, like to develop flow, look for vital, vital target areas, and then also like becoming creative, right? Because I mean, if my number 6 is just like a plain day thing, it's easy for you to counter, right? But if I do something that's totally like unpredictable, then it's hard for you to counter, and that helps you develop and helps me, develop like, oh wow, these are creative ways of attacking.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the one thing I liked about the play that Rory did was when it comes to the locking, it's like, we learn, and I don't know if Kajukenbo has like a set type of locks that they teach. I know, like for me, it's kind of dwindled over the years, but there's like probably 15 locks, specific locks that I teach, and then some variations. And, they all have names, and, I just give them English names, but it's, in reality, all of those locks are just based on 3 joints and how they move. So dynamically, if all I know is a center lock and I'm trying to go for that center lock, then the guy is going to, beat my face in. But if I understand how the 3 joints move, then I can be more dynamic. And, honestly, no real situation ever looks pretty.
Right.
So it's like a lock doesn't have to be pretty for it to work.
Yeah.
But it's also not the end all be all.
Right.
So it's, so just like on that 6th move that you're talking about, if I get that 6th move, it's like, okay, I see something coming at me. I'm going to, capture or block or whatever. And then I'm going to make my counter however ugly it is, but it'll,
right.
If I know my fundamentals,
right, then
and my principles based off of those, then I can somewhat counter and save myself.
Yeah, we got like, we call them chi-nas in the Wanhap-Gendo section of Kajukenbo.
Okay.
And we got, I believe it's 32 total chi-nas. But then also from the Filipino system, the Kunci lock flow.
Okay.
Which I like. I like trying to use some of the Kaju locks into the Kunci lock flow because, it's taking locks to kind of to another level. It's not one independent thing, right? You have to. So if somebody redirects, because like you said, fights are ugly. It's not like somebody's just going to hand you their hand to put in a certain lock.
Right.
You're going to have to find it.
Exactly.
And Kaju's idea, or I mean, even our niece, I'm going to strike to open up and soften you up till I can get to that position. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll lock when it's there, and then I'm going to lock. I'm not going to keep you probably in that lock. I'm going to go back to striking once, it's a control move to get you somewhere, and then control back and intertwine between striking and locking, when it's available. So, but I think they're very important, aspect of martial arts, especially from stand-up position, which, you look at most traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu systems and it starts from stand-up, and you don't learn the ground stuff till later, because that's only one aspect of the Japanese system.
Right.
When we were down in LA, we stopped at this Kempo school, and the guy was saying, yeah, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is kind of a partial art because they focused only on the ground aspect of Jiu-Jitsu,
Mm-hmm.
But is it good? Yes, it's very effective,
Yeah.
I think that me personally, I wouldn't base myself off of the ground stuff because I'm just not a ground person,
Yeah, neither am I.
Yeah.
I know my basics.
Yeah.
I know my basics.
Right. And I know my basics. My thing is like, okay, well, I'm not going to stay down there and play the game with you. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's your game. I'm not going to, do it. So I'm going to hopefully try to do whatever I can to not get out, That's where your blade comes in. No. Although you can't do that, you got laws.
Well, I think, and you bring up the law thing, that's so tricky, because it's like, okay, well, if I'm carrying a knife and I get attacked and I use my knife, in this sue happy society, the justice system may be like, you are good to go, completely justified. But then, the person that's missing a couple fingers, now it's back on me.
Right.
You know? And that's, so it's, I don't know. I've never been to court sued wise. I've been to court many times to, defend my actions in use of force situations and talk about, and even defend some of the people that I've trained in self-defense situations. But it's one of those things where it's like, when you use tools and up the level, and even it's like how much, I mean, I'm going to defend myself regardless, it's, going to court is, I don't want to have to think about that because I don't want to hesitate,
Right.
And I think, but that's certainly a reality.
Oh yeah. It's total reality. And the sad thing is that when you look at your everyday family or whatever, when they see violence, it's going to be ugly. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, and then the fact that you're a martial artist, you should have been able to do this. You should have been able to do that because you're a martial artist. Mm-hmm. Well, that's unrealistic. You know what I mean? But the problem is that society and law enforcement and the legal department, or the legal system says that you're a martial artist, you're a black belt, you're this. You should have been able to control the situation. You should have been able to do it without having to pull a knife. Right. But that's not reality. I mean, the reality is that, people, and you've probably worked with people when they're on drugs. It could be the smallest person in the world, and all of a sudden he's got this crazy strength that we
call it, it's not non-PC comment coming up here. Retard strength.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they have this strength, and it doesn't matter. I mean, the thing is as a martial artist, we learn stuff, but again, the individual has to be able to do it. And then we're relying on the attacker, to utilize and try to control something of mayhem.
Yeah.
And for them to think that our life isn't in danger because we're a black belt is just profound. I just can't believe that, oh, you're a black belt, so you should have been able to do this, or you should have been able to do that. You shouldn't have had to use a knife. There's actually a kind of like a 3-part documentary on YouTube about this kid. And this isn't even a martial artist, right? Okay. So this kid had a karambit. He's Filipino. He got a karambit from, I believe, his grandfather or something like that. And he was walking by this party, and some girl that he knew had said something. Well, all of a sudden, all these guys at the party just start beating him up, right? Well, he was able to escape, and then he had to go somewhere later, and he had to go back by. Well, these guys started doing it again. Well, he was getting pounded on, and he goes, man, I'm going to have to do something drastic here, or else, my life's going to, I could end my life. These guys are like beating the hell out of me, Right. And so he pulled his karambit out and was like, don't come at me because, stop it, Well, the guy didn't take it as a real threat and tried to come at him again, and he cut him up. Well, this kid had to go to jail, and he ended up having to go to fight the legal system to finally get, to come away, not guilty. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you pull out a knife, the legal system, you're going to be in court, in jail, trying to prove you're innocent.
Right.
And that's kind of it. I don't know.
I'd be interested to watch that. If you find that link, send it to me, because I'd be interested. And whenever I get that, I'll post that in the comments, because that's an interesting. Be interested to watch that video. Okay, yeah. I'll try to find it and send it to you. Yeah. No, that's and when it comes to I had my very first harness instructor, because I did a little bit here and there. went to some seminars with Remy Priestess, but not a lot, so I knew very, very little. So when I finally made the decision, okay, I'm going to start training in modern harness, I found a local instructor, and she had been I think she had been a Clackamas County deputy, and she went to court over something. I think she used her baton to pull some guy out of a car, and I don't even know. I don't know if it was a baton or if it was a PR-24, but anyway, she used one of those tools to pull this guy out of a car, and goes to court, and they're like, well, you got law enforcement training, you got martial arts training. Could there have been anything else that you could have done? And she goes, oh yeah, I could have done, and she goes down the list of like all the really bad things she could have done. She's like, I used the least amount of force that I needed to. Yeah. So he got a couple bruises, but he was resisting arrest and, made a good case. But when she was like, yeah, I could have beat him. I could have done this. I could have done this.
Right.
But it was those questions like, okay, you have all this training. What else could you have done?
Right.
And you get this, when I first started in the martial arts, it was like, oh, if black belts have to be registered, and if you tell a black belt, if you're in a fight and somebody says I'm a black belt, you can automatically shoot them because that's they're doing lethal force.
I still get that question.
I just like, oh my God, and the longer and longer I'm in this art, I'm just like, oh my God, those are somehow we just have to kill those myths,
Right. And it's so funny. I recently got asked that, like, did you have to register your weapons? So if you get in a fight, do you have to tell them? And I'm like, why would I tell them I'm a black belt?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what would I tell them that for? One is my job is to leave safely.
Right.
You know what I mean? And if somebody's going to attack me, then they're going to have to deal with whatever I give them. I'm not going to give them the opportunity to say, okay, I'm a black belt. Oh, don't mess with him. You know what I mean? Because, how many times have people done that? Oh, I'm a martial artist. And it's like, yeah, whatever. And then they get beat up, right? Because they weren't really a martial artist. Or maybe they weren't a good martial artist. Or maybe they were a good martial artist and they still got beat up,
Yeah.
It happens. And I think law enforcement has to realize at some point in the justice system has to realize at some point there's only so much that you can do in self-defense in limiting the violence that you have to give back in defending yourself. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, if this was a fairy tale and I was a superhero, I'd just be like, oh, okay, here you go. You get him in a 1-finger Wally J lock and that's the end of the fight,
Yeah.
But that's not reality.
Right.
So I don't know. The whole justice system it sucks for martial artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one guy that I interacted with at the hospital. He had come in patient, but he was trying to, oh, I'm a second-degree black belt in harness and just threatening us. And I was like, okay. I said, well, I don't know harness, or not harness, Aikido. Because I'm second-degree black belt in Aikido. And I said, well, I said, I've done a little bit of Aikido. I said, I've not trained in a lot, but I understand it. I said, if you're a second-degree black belt in Aikido, you wouldn't be acting like this. You'd be much more calmer.
Right. Right.
And it's just like, there was another patient that nurses were freaked out because this person, they're a brown belt in I don't know whatever art it was, but they're a brown belt in karate. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay. It's like, yeah. And then getting to know that patient a little bit, it's like, yeah, they're no threat. They probably studied at McDojo if they're a brown belt.
Right. Well, and the reality is that if you're boasting that you're this,
you're probably not.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Or you're just one of those guys.
Right. And the thing is like you said, Aikido. Come on. Like, who's going to, that's the most like Zen Japanese martial art, you're okay. I'm gonna go out and start boasting, and I guess if I learned from Steven Seagal watching, one of his movies,
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. The information, error. I think that people are learning off YouTube. I mean, it's funny because I say the UFC is WWE on steroids, and it's like me and my buddies, we always talk. It's kind of the white trash sport right now of more reality than the WWE, but it's taking the persona of that. You know what I mean? And the lack of respect that you see, it's all about showmanship, ego, and which is sad because you got some guys in there, Machida and GSP that come from traditional backgrounds that showed a lot of respect, but they're not getting, those guys don't get the same fan base because they're that way.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's what martial arts is about. You know what I mean? Self-improvement, making sure I'm healthy, and it's there if I need it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And when you mix that with a cage, it's like, hey, you're just making animals out of people, And I know HBO did a documentary even on the UFC guys, and the increase in domestic violence with them. So
interesting.
Yeah. I just say, what happens? You mix aggressive behavior and ego in fighting. You know what I mean? It's like, that's all I do. Boom, 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 boom. So what's going to be you're training yourself to respond aggressively.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, do you listen to Joe Rogan at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you listen to the podcast of Rogan and Mike Tyson?
I think I've seen, I listened to some parts of it.
Okay. Awesome.
Uh-huh.
I just a fabulous interview. Very short for a Joe Rogan episode, but it was just great because Tyson talks about how, like, nowadays he doesn't train because he doesn't want to be that person anymore.
Right.
Because when he was younger, it was about fighting. And, of course, he's got domestic violence, things against him. He's got, a rape thing against him. But it was just one of those things where it's just like, he doesn't want to be that person anymore.
Right.
Because he didn't like himself back then. And I was like, wow, just what a, because if you're just in there, just like fight. Yeah. You can not be a nice person. You know?
Right. Well,
I totally get it.
And I believe in that episode didn't Tyson say that Gus Amato had trained him to be an animal?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, and really, I mean, that's kind of the mindset that you're training all these guys. You got to be an animal in there, So recently, well, actually two people that I know, one of my friends was saying that he started training the MMA, and he goes, it just changes your mindset and your attitude. He goes, I realized when I sized my wife up that I need to quit.
Wow.
Right. And then this other guy who I just recently talked to said the same thing. He goes, it changes your mentality, man. He's like, it's like you want to fight everybody.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is crazy because it's totally not what martial arts is about.
Yeah. I mean, there's, when I first started getting into pressure points, and even nowadays, especially, well, it's more honed now. Like if I'm in that situation where I know it's going to a bad place, I look at somebody and I just start seeing polka dots. Mm-hmm. And when I started training, that's how it was. I first started learning. It's just like, oh, I see polka dots, mm-hmm. And so I kind of get that, but yeah, when you start sizing up, your loved ones,
right? That's crazy, right?
That is totally crazy.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I think when I was training with Kurt,
okay,
and I was in my young 20s, and I was going out clubbing and stuff, like I had this. Like, I don't know, like people were just trying to start fights with me all the time. You know what I mean? Because the negative energy that was like around me, and that was, and honestly, since I've left it, haven't been in a fight since. Like really? Since I left training over there, but when you have that negative energy, like, and at that time, it was just like, I was just training, and I'm like just all in it. And I didn't even compete. In fact, I was supposed to compete at DeCosco's for my first tournament back then, but something happened to where Kurt didn't want me to end up competing, you know. But I was young, I was 20, a lot of ego, but again, I still wasn't out trying to start fights, but people just come to me, and I'm glad I'm away from that, I mean, it's funny because, it's like, it's so easy to get yourself out of a situation, and it's ego that keeps you in it.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And, like, especially when it comes to martial arts, I can't, I'm a badass. I have to, you know what I mean? It's like, no, you don't need to, you know what I mean? Why do I need to waste my time?
Exactly.
And why do I got to allow this guy to control my emotions enough to do it? Now, if he just wants to come swing at me, then I'm defending myself. If he wants to attack me or risk assaulting somebody I care about, then now he's going to have to deal with it, But other than that, okay, call me a name, whatever.
Yeah.
Here's my finger. See ya.
Yeah, exactly. And especially on the job, I try and be as objective as possible. It's like, cause I don't care who you are, what your title is, what color you are, what race you are, what religion. I just care about what you've done, And of course, most of the time I'm dealing with patients, so it's more of that caregiver aspect. And, so I, but, when trying to, deal with somebody who's, we're getting away from the term unwanted, but, when you're dealing with that person that you're going to end up trespassing from the property, and it's, it's like, no, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with your behavior.
Right.
And I'm a big guy. So of course, I get all the fat jokes and it's like, yeah, okay. When you come up with something original,
right,
you might start pushing my buttons.
Right. Well, even if he does come something with original, you're like, now, damn, that was a good one.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. 1 point for you, but you still don't got me. Yeah.
Right. Well, and the thing is it's like your verbal judo,
Yeah.
Judo, I'm like, okay, so how can I redirect this energy? You know what I mean? Because one is, this guy's in a situation he doesn't want to be in, you know what I mean? Or is dealing with a stressful situation that has to be, and I don't know if you're dealing with maybe people that are from the criminal system that are housed because they have injuries at the hospital, or you're just dealing with, ridiculous people that are trying to come in and either harass people or you got, domestic situations, but it's like redirecting and trying to get this person to calm down, and I think it's a little harder because you're wearing a uniform, and I think that, anybody who's a law enforcement agency, or security has a lot more difficult time de-escalating because these guys are trying to escalate it with you.
Right.
Absolutely.
And in fact, it's kind of funny that, because, we get law enforcement in all the time, either, police bringing somebody in or we get somebody who's, a convict who's jailed. And so we get, different counties coming in and sitting with their patients and, like, yeah, what is it? Who was, I'm not going to say his name, but I think it was a Multnomah County guy. Ran into him in the hall and he knew people that I knew, but it was the first time I had ever met him. So it was, we had a good little conversation, but it was, I was like, yeah, I said, when he was like, oh, we're hiring. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm getting older. I kind of really like my day shift. and he's like, yeah, he says, no, I understand. And he says, and I said, and I don't know. I just don't want to deal with, I think I told him I didn't want to deal with like that higher level, convict type. Mm. And he's like, oh no, you'd have it much easier in the jails than you have it here at the hospital. He says, you deal with so much more dynamic stuff. We kind of have some type of prediction of what goes on because we,
Yeah, it's a controlled environment.
Yeah, because it's a more controlled environment. And he's like, yeah, he says, he was saying that a lot of, deputies and some law enforcement who've kind of been there and have experienced the hospital, they're like, yeah, no, you guys that have it way much worse.
Yeah, I think there's like, yeah, you got,
okay.
you got a lot more unpredictability at the hospital, especially, I mean, just think of everything that's accessible in there, and you got, somebody could just pick up anything, and whereas, in a jail, in a correctional setting, they don't have that access, mm-hmm. And you get to limit the people that are out, you know what I mean? If somebody's in a hostile situation, you don't have to let them out, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, let them cool down. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Whereas in the hospital, it's like you're kind of dealing with them. You know what I mean? Like at the time. So I just think, I mean, and I get that whole thing about the shift because like your day shift, I don't want to work graves, and that's why you come over to corrections, and that's one of my things, like why I don't want to apply again, because it's like, dude, I'm going to be 46 this next month, yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to. I mean, do I want to deal with these jokers all the time? You know what I mean? And as a law enforcement person, you have to engage. You know what I mean? You have to control your environment. You know what I mean? And so no matter what, you're putting yourself in these situations that you're going to have to deal with, these people, because, these guys, again, they don't want to listen to you. You know what I mean? Right. And as soon as you got a uniform on, you're an enemy. You know what I mean? It's not that, hey, I didn't do the stupid thing and commit the crime. You know what I mean? You guys caught me. You're the bad guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, and it's fun. Is that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, so I've went to lunches with deputies and all of a sudden people are yelling at them for no reason. And it's just like, God, just because they have a uniform on, mm-hmm. They're getting, attacked, and I haven't seen any physical attacks, but, just seeing the verbal stuff alone, right. And, they just walk it off like, hey, you're not a threat to me, so, hard job though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we've had like at the hospital it's kind of a stepping stone for people. Uh-huh. They're coming to, and there are some people who have made it their career. I plan to only be there 5 years, and I'm in my 12th year now. So it's kind of how how things work out. But a lot of people, it's like their goal is either law enforcement or some type of law enforcement. Some people, a lot of people go into corrections. Some people have gone into police work. There have been police officers who have gotten out of police work and come to security and gotten back into police work. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting environment. It's a lot different than your standard security guard type jobs where you're either watching dirt or even given a patrol car to drive around at night,
right.
Dealing with humans on especially violent humans on a daily basis. It takes a certain type of person, and it takes a certain type of training to do,
Yeah.
So
I'm sure it's got to be a high stress, job, especially, all the personalities that come in there. Mm-hmm. And then again, if there's somebody that don't want to be there, like especially, how many, let's say we have a big epidemic of drugs right now,
right?
You know what I mean? So how many people do you see that are coming in that are like maybe they're arrested by police and they're bringing them in to get them checked out, or just people coming in because they know that they're fucked up, but then they violently, like they're just violent and on drugs and don't act. I mean,
we get a lot of people that I deal with, get people coming in, they're high on meth or heroin or whatever, and police have picked them up and bring them in for either a sober re-eval, or maybe they've, you get these people who have their first psychotic break, and sometimes that's triggered by drugs, even pot, you know, that it's, that they, oh yeah, no, they're the nicest, quietest person ever. And then they go, smoke a joint, and then boom, it's just that small percentage of people that now they're crazy.
Right.
To use the.
Well, now that they've legalized marijuana, it seems like, I mean, again, I've never ever smoked marijuana. I've never had the desire to. I just never seen it. And it was funny. Actually, we were up at Seagong Richard's place, and there was 3 of us that had never smoked pot, and I'm like, oh my God, normally I'm the only one,
That's funny.
But, from what I've heard is that since they've legalized it, like it's crazy insane, the amount of potency that it has,
Well, because Washington legalized it first, and I think what is maybe a year later, 18 months later, Oregon legalized it. And I think one of the trends that we saw was that you have a lot of people who are like, oh, it's legal now, so I'll do it. And but there's a lot of people who are like, well, I'm not really a smoker, so I'm going to do the edibles. And instead of eating one cookie, they eat the box. One cookie is fine. Might give them a little buzz. Of course, edibles, it's not going to be right away. Your body has to start to digest it before it starts feeling it. So they eat a cookie and be like, oh, I'm not feeling anything. So they eat another one. Or they're just like me. You can't just eat one cookie.
Right.
But then they get this overdose psychosis because they've had too much, And so when it comes to those type of things, it's like, okay, well, it's the edibles. Or you have those, or, and that's what we've really seen. You get the people who, I don't know, for me, it was always, I always thought the most violent, potheads would be, 2 fighting over a bag of Doritos.
Right.
That's kind of the joke,
right.
But I think it's those people who don't understand how potent it is now, So you get the people who have edibles who are eating too much, or you have people who used to smoke it back when they were younger, and now that they're older and it's legal, they pick up stuff and it's these strains are more potent than what they're used to. So I don't know. We got we have people in our neighbors of mine who smoke, and so, sometimes I'll go out on my back deck and it's just like, oh, okay, contact high, getting a little munchies.
Yeah.
But, it's really the smell that really I can't stand. When I was younger, I smoked a little bit, but I was never a big pothead. And when it comes to drugs, it's never been one of those things where, food is my addiction. Drugs have never been my addiction, know. When I turned 21, my mom was like, oh, we have alcoholism on both sides of our family. And I was like, well, if I was going to be an alcoholic, we would have known when I was 14.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, but it's one of those where it's just like, my wife, she's never smoked it, and I even joked about, oh, hey, I was thinking now that it's legal, maybe I should, I don't know. I don't want my kids to look negatively on it because, or negative at me. And she's like, are you serious? I was like, no. I said, and she goes, because we're talking we're talking that's a deal breaker. You know, we're talking divorce. I'm like, wow. Ooh, wow. You know,
Yeah.
Been with her like 25 years, and I'm like, yeah, she's only used that term once before.
Right.
Know?
Well, it's funny. So when I opened my school, you know, one thing is that I could even go back to high school. It was funny. I was so anti-drugs that my friends would like hide doing stuff. Like they didn't want to tell me because I'd lecture them like crazy.
Oh, wow.
You know, but I drink. We drink alcohol, you know. So, like that was okay technically with my dad because, you know, we're Native American and I mean, they just drank, but drugs, you know, other drugs were like, no, you know what I mean? So, but then alcohol, like you said, like alcoholism is in my family. So there was a point in time when I was like 15 to 17 years old and we were out partying all the time. And I was just like, you know what? I don't need this, you know? And so I stopped and I stopped till I was, you know, in my, probably, I think it was 22 years old, you know, and then we were out going to the clubs and my friends are like picking up on all these girls and I'm sitting over there like a stiff, like, you know, and I'm just like, man, I'm like, I have no balls here. No, to like, or courage to go up, you know what I mean? And talk to anybody. So I was like, okay, maybe I need to loosen up a little bit. So, you know, I had, you know, some drinks then, and, you know, I drink periodically, but when I opened my martial arts school, I was like, I didn't want to do any of it.
Right.
I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to do anything because I was like, these people are looking up to me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I was like, I got to be a role model, you know? But then socially, like you're out with your friends and it's like, why can't I have a drink? You know what I mean? So then I was like, well, if I do it and teach responsibility, you know what I mean? Yes. You know, then I think that's important, you know, is to say, hey, look, whatever you do, be responsible. You know what I mean? And you are responsible for your own actions, you know? So, I used martial arts to try to help build character in kids. I was like, you know, what we want are good human beings in our society, and martial arts is a huge tool to make that happen. You know, it's not about being the badass or do all that, you know. It's about breaking barriers and making yourself better, you know. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. I think you know, one of the questions I've asked other people is like, you know, how's martial arts made your life better? You know, what have you gotten out of it? And it is, you know, it's, you mentioned character. You know, I just put up an episode about you know, judging people by character, because we get into this, you know, this judgy. It's like, oh, you know, that person's wearing a hijab, so obviously they're a terrorist, right? You know, that stupid mentality. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, it's when it comes to, you know, students coming into our schools, especially the younger ones, you know, I was lucky. My parents were just like, you know, you treat people based on character, mm-hmm. you know, doesn't matter who they are, you know, that you treat them how they treat you. And, you know, doesn't matter what their background is, their color, all that kind of stuff. But there are some people that don't teach their kids that way. So, you know, it's like, okay, well, if, you know, how am I going to translate my martial arts into, you know, being that role model for kids? Because, you know, there are, I mean, like I love her to death. She's my son's girlfriend. I call her Public, mm-hmm. because everything she learned in public school, you know, and, you know, her parents are nice people, but they kind of relied on the school system to teach her things. Right. And like stuff that I've taught my kids that, you know, they don't teach in, I don't know. I just kind of, you know, I was like, I took that education for granted when I teaching my kids. Cause for her, it's like, oh, why didn't you know this? Did your parents not teach you this? Or do they not teach that in school? And she's like, no, You know, and it's not one specific subject either.
Yeah.
So when it comes to being that martial arts instructor, when you have students, especially the younger ones, it's, you know, just because we interact with so many different cultures in the martial arts, you know, maybe, you know, even people from different races, because a lot of the martial arts come from not America.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So it's like, you know, how are you going to treat these other people, and how are you going to treat, you know, the people that are in your class?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to, you know, show respect to your fellow students, your instructor? And it is all, you know, basically kind of teaching that character. That character is teaching on how to judge on character.
Right. And it breaks, I mean, that breaks barriers alone right there. It's like, you know, you look at the cultural aspect of martial arts. Martial arts as itself as a culture, but it's not prejudiced to anybody.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
well, except for maybe Taekwondo.
Hey man, let's leave.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Rex Kwando, you know,
Ameridote all the way.
Right. Exactly. But you know, it's funny because I'm like, you go martial arts and food. What better way to build bridges?
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And you know, the thing is with martial arts, and you're opening, you know, like Bruce Lee said, is like, hey, they don't understand us. Let them understand us. You know what I mean? And martial arts allows you to have that, you know, certain amount of intimacy, because when we're training, it's like you're close. You know what I mean? And we have to get close to people that it feels uncomfortable to the point where it feels, you know, hey, we're next to you and we're training right side by side with you, blood, sweat, and tears, and you know, we're equal.
Right.
You know what I mean? And military does that too, you know, at certain extent. You know, actually, I'm doing some of the stuff for the paper, my history class, and we're talking about, I mean, the 60s and segregation and all that stuff. And it's like, you know, here you got all these African Americans and people fighting in the military, but then they come back to the U.S. and they weren't treated the same.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, you know, we need to look at people as human beings, not as, you know, oh, you're black, you're white, you're Indian, or you're, you know, Mexican, or this or that. And martial arts kind of allows that. You know what I mean? Because when you come in, we're in here for one reason, and we're in here to train and to make each other better.
Right.
You know, and I like that aspect about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Well, so coming to the end, we're over an hour. If people want to get in touch with you for this team, how do they get in touch with you? How do they become part of this tournament team?
Well, they can. I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
Sifu Shannon Spahan. And then they can get a hold of through you. You can message me or whatever.
Okay. I'll put a link in the
I'm not gonna. I mean, I guess I could give out my. You could just do sifushannon@gmail.com and email me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
So,
very good. Now, I think you don't have your school now.
I don't know. I closed it almost 3 years ago now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but you use a buddy's dojo to train at.
Yeah. So we go up to Seagung Richards. Studio.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, awesome. I think we had I really enjoyed this conversation because, you know, it's so far I've had people on that I've known. And, you know, I know you. Right. But we've never actually talked, and I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's been good. I liked it.
I'm glad you were able to come up.
And we went all over the place.
We did. We kind of little squirrel. Boop,
right.
Boop, boop, boop.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, so if you haven't subscribed already, if you've hung around this long, hit the subscribe button, comment. Love to hear what you guys think about the conversation. And Sifu, glad you were able to come up and have a talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been an honor.
Yeah. All right, and we are out.